Howdy, my hungering slaughter beast. It's me, Mansant, back at you with today's installment of the Best 3 series, this time versus Rhinar. So, as you sit across from your opponent and he reveals Rhinar, what do you need to be thinking about? Well, the first thing to know is that Rhinar is a hero of basically 3 different trade patterns. Number 1, he likes to block with 3 cards and still swing back with Romping Club. Now, Romping Club is a very efficient weapon, swinging in for 4 attack for only 2 resources, which is a pretty decent breakpoint, meaning he will chip a little bit of damage through here and there by just swinging Romping Club. But that doesn't win him the game. Instead, what he's really trying to build up for are these very large Intimidate turns where he can potentially stack 3 or 4 Intimidates from cards like Barraging Beatdown, Awakening Bellow, his own hero effect where when he discards a 6, he can intimidate you, along with some attacks that have Intimidate as well, like Alpha Rampage and Pack Hunt. When Rhinar builds up to one of these really strong Intimidate attacks that take away basically your whole hand, well, that's exactly it. You are hard-pressed to block at all, and these attacks will slam you, especially in Blitz when you only have 20 life. If it's not lethal, it will at least put you in a position where all of a sudden even his off turns where he's swinging Romping Club are very threatening. Now, the other trade pattern he has, which is more of the middle ground, is where he can block with 2 and still swing back with cards like Smash with Big Tree, Command and Conquer, or Smash Instinct, or even stacking a Barraging Beatdown on a Romping Club. Now, when he goes for those plays, it's a lot more threatening after he's already pulled off a big Intimidate attack, because that's when, if you block with cards on these 2-card plays, like Smash with Big Tree or Command and Conquer, for example, then he's dragging you down to a slower game plan, buying himself time to set up another big Intimidate play for game, most likely. Now, as a Levia player, we actually have a really good play into this because of Carrion Husk. Carrion Husk is a get-out-of-jail-free card in this matchup because it protects you from when Rhinar gets a really strong Intimidate turn off, you still have the ability to block pretty tall, effectively 2 cards worth of block, all in this Carrion Husk. And that's fantastic because normally Rhinar also has to take quite a bit of damage to keep enough cards for these large Intimidate turns. And so you have the ability to flip the game pretty pivotably because remember, Intimidate doesn't actually get rid of the cards. They're going to go back to your hand. So when you use Carrion Husk and then get passed back your full hand to swing back into him, well, Rhinar just doesn't have the blocking equipment to match what you just did with Carrion Husk there. So you normally come out quite on top. The other thing to note is that when you get intimidated, yes, it can affect your blocking a little bit, but for the most part, you're a deck that just wants to toss a lot of your cards in graveyard in the beginning anyway, so you don't quite mind what is specifically intimidated as long as you can get something in grave. So the other thing, last thing in this matchup, is that when Rhinar is back on his 2-card game plan, which is something you actually quite like to match, you just have better value than he does. Your Endless Maw, for example, or your Dread Screamer plus Ghostly Visit are 2 to 3 power over what Rhinar can do off 2 cards. So these things just go in your favor over the course of the game, and normally mean you end up pretty on top of this matchup. So with that, let's see how the best of 3 went. Hello, and here we go with the gameplay of today's best 3 video. What we see there is the die roll where I actually do win, and I decide to go first in this matchup. And that's really because you never want to risk going second into Rhinar with his ability to potentially just have a nuts hand where he can intimidate so much of your hand away that you can't effectively block on your turn 0, and you just take a huge chunk of damage. So you never really want to risk that. Because seriously, the potential is there where Rhinar just starts you at 10 life. So yeah, just don't do that. So instead we see me going first, and I actually have kind of the god opener here where I'm able to burn a sigil out early and then follow up with a Deadwood Rumbler. And normally the red or blue is fine on turn 1, but the red of course is better. And the beauty of playing sigil first is that even if I discarded a Blood Debt card, a 6 in particular, I wouldn't be forced to banish it. I could instead just banish the sigil. So that's always a fantastic combo, and it did come up this game, so that's amazing. And we see me arsenaling the Writhing Beasthulk there, which is what I actually had in hand going into this. The card I drew discarded was a blue Barraging, so not a huge loss on that front. So now I'm very set up. I've got everything I need to have a really good Blood Rush turn already, because I've got that Writhing Beasthulk. That is the attack I need to follow up after a Claws. So what I'm looking for now from the Rhinar player is pretty much nothing too crazy. Any kind of middle of the road play, I'm very happy with here. Especially if he doesn't intimidate my Fate Foreseen, I'd be quite happy with that because obviously that is a card I want to block with. Now, I don't actually have a hand that is live for going for Blood Rush right now, but even so, I can still just take a slower turn since I don't have Blood Debt yet to potentially just Barraging Beatdown and then Claw Swing, something along those lines. So when Ben here goes for a double Intimidate play with that Barraging and Pack Hunt, he actually hit the best targets for me because I didn't want to lose Blood Rush there, of course, and Doomsday I couldn't block with anyway. So losing both of those to Intimidate really meant nothing. So that was very, very lucky on my end. So by blocking with 2, I'm negating the bonus from the Barraging Beatdown, but actually it's just efficient anyway because I wanted to cover up the full damage from Pack Hunt. So my turn just becomes cycling out this attack to go ahead and set up a different flavor of Blood Rush. I always love going in with Blood Rush with that attack in Arsenal, but it'd be way too greedy to just swing claws, pass, hold a card. That would just not be strong enough and really be telling of kind of the power that my hand had. So by cycling out Arsenal here, I'm really not showing Ben anything necessarily. So just coming in for 6. And these are the turns where Ben could potentially have a really strong Intimidate turn back into me because I'm not presenting anything too crazy, not presenting a hit effect. So if he just decides to take some damage to potentially drag me all the way down, he could do it. Now, that is not the line he opts for. Instead, he's going for his own Blood Rush, so he trimmed his hand a bit to get rid of the pummel there. Makes sense. And I'm just pointing out here that Massacre actually doesn't get its own Intimidate effect from Blood Rush because it has to be discarded to an attack. So he still gets the Intimidate from Rhinar, but he doesn't get that double Intimidate from Massacre. A lot of people mess that up because it doesn't actually make that much sense. You'd think Massacre would just get the double Intim off anything, kind of like how Beast Within triggers off of any flavor of discard. So we see that Intimidate come through. And I'm not too worried here because Rhinar is a deck that it tends to be raw damage focused, and really the one card that is scary is that Barraging Beatdown. If he leads with like a red or yellow Barraging Beatdown, then those are the turns that you're basically forced to interact with. Otherwise, you're just playing really poorly into his trade pattern. So I don't want to see the Barragings necessarily come through because that's what really forces my hand into blocking. Otherwise, I can just levy what kind of damage he can deal versus what I can deal without really worrying about it beyond that. So as he comes in here, he's thinking about potentially playing for that pummel, I do believe. He's got a Pack Hunt and a pummel there. And, you know, the weird part about pummel overall is that it is really hard to actually use pummels if you don't have extra resources coming from like Tunic, or in his case, the Barkbone Strapping. So that's really why the Barkbone Strapping is in this list. This is Yazi's Blitz Rhinar. It's really just for that explosive high roll capabilities of I'm just going to slam a pummel as early as possible and just take tempo and then end the game with a large Intimidate because you couldn't swing back into me very well. So that's kind of the idea behind that strategy. But since he hasn't blocked with the Barkbone yet, it's not worth cracking it for the pummel here, or at least he's deciding it's not. So then on my turn, I actually do get the Blood Rush playoff, and this isn't going to be like the most beautifully set up Blood Rush, especially because I do discard the Boneyard right off the bat. Boneyard is a really, really strong play at the end of a Blood Rush, obviously, because you pitch a blue into your second clause into ending with the Blood Rush. So I am in a bit of a pickle here. I don't have any more resources in hand. Instead, I have 3 reds with an Endless, a Hungering, and a Writhing Beast Hulk. So I really don't have the luxury of resources on this Blood Rush turn. So I could be considering whether or not to Hope Merchant's Hood. because if I just don't present a lot of damage, then it's once again that scary state of Rhinar can keep a huge hand into me and potentially knock me all the way down. Now, I am a little bit saved from that because I still have Carrion Husk up, but that doesn't mean I want it to happen. If I can present a decent amount of damage, then I trade Rhinar down a bit, and I like trading Rhinar down because I win those lower hand size trades with the cards like Endless Maw, Dread Screamer, and Ghostly. So I am going to use Hope Merchants, and this is a bit greedy. I don't actually have Blood Debt yet, so there's an argument there to just go ahead shuffle the entire hand just to make the odds better of finding resources, because I don't actually have to hold on to a specific way to turn off Blood Debt. It's not like it's life or death in this situation. So I think this is a bit of a mistake. This is muscle memory from playing so many other Levia games. Keep the Blood Debt attack, but I don't think that was right here, because what I'm really going for is just a way to at least swing something better than just claws. And I guess, like, in theory, this hand still works for that, but it's exactly the same as it was pre-Hope Merchant's Hood, where if I actually want to swing claws into another attack, I'm going to be losing my arsenal. And that's just not ideal, of course. Arsenal is very important here because in a matchup like this, he's really hoping that these Intimidates are going to interrupt what my game plan is. So if he gets these Intimidates off right and I have to block Funky because of whatever happened and I don't have an arsenal, then my game plan just kind of becomes at the mercy of what Intimidates allow me to keep. And if I was going into my turns with an arsenal setup, that means I don't actually have to worry about necessarily what the Intimidates did to my hand, because at least I have like my primary attack in arsenal already. So it's sad to see no arsenal on a turn like this, because I definitely should have been able to set up an arsenal here if I just didn't miss on all the resources. So unfortunate, but I'm at least coming in for 12 total on this play, which is decent damage. I mean, Rhinar doesn't have a ton of block with his equipment. So if he decides to commit cards from hand, that's what I'm watching for. That's what I'm happy about, because it means his trade pattern is going to be something less than just a massive dominant play. But he's deciding to instead actually that was 14 total, not 12. Instead, he's just using equipment. So I'm kind of happy for that, because with his equipment basically gone, he's got one more block on the Scabskins. I still have my full equipment here with a huge life lead. So I'm really watching his turn carefully here, because this is where he could potentially try to swing it back in his favor, but it's going to just be really tough because I have that Carrion Husk up. So really watching for what Ben's play was. And he's going to go ahead and risk it on the pulping, which actually isn't like the worst play into a Levia like this, because after you started to stack a couple Intimidates, you can just try to get lucky and hope that they have non-blocks left in hand anyway. So something like a pulping might just like be active. But I think what he's going for is that no matter what, if that pulping hit or not, he actually is opened up to pummel, because I do believe his arsenal is a pummel, not entirely sure. So he's coming in for 8 dominate, and I won't have the opportunity to turn off go again or turn off the barraging effect. So this is when, we'll throw Husk in the way, because I'm under threat of losing it anyway at this breakpoint. And the other thing here is that I do know the list runs quite a bit of pummels, so by throwing it here, it does play a little bit around the fact that he could have chucked the damage a little bit higher with pummel, which is what he's doing here. So he went pretty greedy with the bark one there, trying to play pummel without having to pitch. That way he could set that reckless swing in arsenal, I guess. I don't think valuing the reckless swing in arsenal is actually very strong at all here, though. So that just overall seems like a bit of a mistake. So the cool thing, though, about pummel effects into Levia and all these discard effects is that Beast Within, when I choose to discard it, is going to refill my hand anyway. And especially if I've already committed to using Husk, then it's pretty safe to just go ahead and use it, because it doesn't really matter what damage you're taking there as long as you just don't die. So, I mean, overall, this turn really went my way. because I'm going to have a full 4 cards still because of that Beast Within letting me refill my hand anyway, because of me using the Husk. Ben committed a ton of cards to that play and didn't really take me down to a life threshold that's like that scary, especially since he doesn't have Arsenal, he barely has equipment left, and I get to slam back into him with 4 cards and hopefully presenting lethal on his 8 life here. Yeah, which is actually already happening because I'm leading with a red Dread Screamer, and minimum it would be a Claws follow-up, right? So that'd be 9 already on his 8 with his 1 blocking equipment. So the more cards I'm actually dragging out of his hand here, though, the better, because I know I'll be able to push through and crack him with just my hardy damage as the game goes on. I mean, I've already got that Howl found, so as soon as that thing gets banished, my damage numbers become amazing. I have another Blood Rush still, so the more cards I just drag out of his hand, the better, because that's just less threat on my end, because I know that I have enough damage to close this game. But instead, he's kind of going in between here, blocking, taking a bit of damage. So that gives me the read that I can go ahead, try to be a bit more aggressive, pull more cards out of his hand. So I go ahead, roll Scabskins, which is actually just correct anyway because I'd already turned off Blood Debt. And with how I'm forced to pitch for a second attack anyway, I'd have left over to swing Claws. So, you know, I don't just straight up roll Scabs to swing Claws, but in a situation like this, I would have the resources anyway through just what the play was going to be regardless. But I didn't want to roll Scabs first because there's the opportunity there to banish the Howl from Beyond on that Dread Screamer, and that would have actually given me the 3 damage without having to roll Scabskins. So you can see a bit of risk mitigation there. And then we see the rest of this turn falling through. I'm just at this point absolutely tearing Ben's hand apart, and it's going to be like this pretty much for the rest of the game. Because I have at least 2 turns where I don't have to commit cards from hand to what he can do if he decides to swing club still. If he's just going to Arsenal, then, I mean, you know, all good for me. The other thing that he should read here is what I've got in Graveyard, and I've got just 2 cards, but of course, Howl from Beyond is set up in the Banish Zone, so I'm going to have an attack no matter what. And that's what I was just pointing out to Ben, like, you know, if you were considering trying to mess me up on the Blood Debt, don't worry, I've got my Howl. So now we look at Ben, he's got that Blood Rush in hand, and I really think he should have swung Club there, because there's almost no way he's keeping 2 cards still, which is what he would need to play that Blood Rush. He needs something to pitch and something to discard, which is just not going to happen with him at 2 life, I don't believe. Especially with me having the Howl set up, especially with me having Scabskins and Gambler's Glove still, I'm always going to throw maximum damage at Ben. So he really should have taken the opportunity to swing in. I guess try to get me in Reckless range. I wouldn't have let it happen. I definitely would have thrown in Scabskins to not let me die to Reckless. But here we go. Back into me. I get my 4 cards. And I'm going to play a little bit smart about it in case I get a 1 into a 1. I'm not going to lethal myself. By playing the Howl first, that puts me at 5 Blood Debt, so that even if I did roll that 1 into a 1, I wouldn't just straight up die. But here we go. I get a Boneyard coming in for 9. That's another beautiful 2-card hand by having that Howl set up. A blue and a Boneyard becomes 9 damage, which is fantastic. It's not quite the 10 of Ghostly Visit Dread Screamer, but it is really, really strong. And speaking of strong, Doomsday Summoning Blazophyte is pretty darn good, which is what we see here to seal up game 1. And then looking at game 2 here, as we jump right into it, we've got Ben deciding who to go first or second, and of course he does choose to go first, hoping that he gets that incredible, strong Intimidate start. And what we see is not necessarily that, but it's at least a turn 1 play. He's got a Beast Within and then 2 reds in hand. I think one was an Alpha Rampage. So what he's going to dig for here on the Sand Sketch plan is a blue. And actually, he doesn't have to reveal what he searches there, actually, because Sand Sketch can be anything. So he's going to go ahead and try to cheese me on a pretty strong turn 1, where he gets 2 action points, swings Club, and swings Alpha Rampage. That's a bit of a greedy line, honestly, because with his hand, he could have just played Alpha Rampage. He had the blue with Sand Sketch, and he had the Alpha Rampage to Intimidate and discard, so That would have dealt like about 3 damage, so I guess he's trying to deal more than 3 on this opening turn, right? That's why you would go for a line like this, but it's more reliant on luck because the Sand Sketch is going to discard a random card. And as we see here, I actually have fancy fingers. I do hit that Wrecker Romp that he did search. So there goes his blue that was going to fuel the majority of his turn here. So that was very unfortunate for Ben, but I mean, he went for a greedy line and got punished for it. So he still got, decent turn 1 stuff. We're going to resolve the Intimidate, forgot about that, but it's nowhere near what he was hoping, right? Ooh, and then there he goes looking at the card he intimidated. So we'll just forget that happened, Ben. Honestly, it was all fine because what I've got in hand are all blocking cards anyway. It was kind of a strange draw. I had 2 red Barraging Beatdown and 2 red Endless Maw. They were all stacked up quite oddly. But really, like I said, anything I get to discard here is totally fine, or rather block with is fine by me because they all block anyway, and I have a bunch of duplicates. So as long as I'm stuck with, and this is kind of the best case scenario as well, stuck with 1 and 1 of those 4 cards, I'm still very happy about my play because Barraging is one of the better cards to just burn out and get you at 3 cards in a graveyard. So I am going to take a little bit of chip damage, but it's at the cost of Ben's arsenal. So I'm very, very okay with this because if I can still come in with a strong play here and set up arsenal, I'll be drastically ahead. And as we see from this hand, I have multiple avenues of doing it. Because I have that Barraging Beatdown, I can lead in with a Barraging into one of my attacks, either the Endless or the Hungering, and then Arsenal the other attack. So there we go. That puts me at 3 engrave. The other thing is it doesn't ramp up Blood Debt necessarily too high just yet because there's only that 1 Blood Debt in graveyard. So this is fine. It's really early to go for a Blood Debt banish like this. But it's huge tempo because I'm guaranteed to at least pull 2 cards out of his hand because there's no way he wants to let the Barraging damage go through. And that's exactly what we saw there. He's going to block with 2 cards, even throwing in a piece of equipment there, and still takes a plink of damage. So we're about even on this right now. And I've got that Hungering now set up in Arsenal with this new hand. And this new hand is just freaking fantastic. We're having a great game this time around. I have the Eye of Ophidia plus Blood Rush plus Beast Within, and then just another card I can throw in for blocking fodder. I mean, we are drawing super, super hot this game. So that's fantastic. What we saw on Ben's end there was also just a little bit strange. He rolled the Barkbone, since he's already gone ahead and blocked with it, to try to just get a free Command and Conquer off so that he could Arsenal Blood Rush, which is actually like a decent line, but when you get the extra resource like that, I almost feel like maybe you just play Blood Rush, discard the Command and Conquer, because that'll at least help you cycle to still swing pretty tall with Club for 7, and then Arsenal something else. So little strange on that play, but it had rewards potentially. So I'm going to go ahead commit Husk plus that extra card I had in hand to block because obviously I don't want to let a Command and Conquer hit me right now. I've got everything I could ever want set up for this Blood Rush, so no reason to lose it. So here we go. This is the God hand. Absolutely love seeing this. So normally with the Eye of Ophidia, the reason it's so good, especially in conjunction with the Beast Within, is that you can save yourself a little bit of HP by making sure that you do hit a 6 on that first banish with the Beast Within. So that's what we do here, and I even see that I saw a blue next, so I'm going to go ahead and keep that, because obviously I want to see blues. So this is basically guaranteed 18 damage with a hand like this. It's not fantastic, because I'm missing out on the capability of having potentially another blue to be able to even roll Scabskins and try to get both of these brute attacks off, the Writhing Beasthulk and the Hungering Slaughter Beast, but not going to be the case. This is still a very good turn. 18 damage is nothing to shirk at. So now he is committing quite a bit of equipment and still obviously taking huge chunks of damage here. But I'm not going to be able to present lethal to the point where I necessarily scare cards out of his hand. it is going to be a huge chunk of damage if he decides not to block this last swing. So my call there is to actually swing the Hungering instead of the Writhing, because if he does take this damage, which, I mean, he might, if he takes this damage, then saving a Dominate for later is going to be very, very strong, because it will threaten to just end the game off of just a 6 attack with Dominate. So gonna hold that there, reset Arsenal with that Writhing. And now this does demand those cards from hand to block. Still chipping damage through, which is kind of the beauty of Blood Rush, is that you still deal a ton of damage even when they commit equipment, even when they commit cards in hand. So now we see Ben's play back into me is, a decent Rhinar play, but I've got a massive lead now. I still have all the block left of my Scabskins as well. And he's really not getting fortunate with these Intimidates on me either. He intimidated away my Sigil, which couldn't block anyway, so unfortunate there. So even so, I actually have non-blocks in this hand. I think I have enough where I actually can't turn off the barraging. I have the Deadwood, I at least see now. And what's the other one? Doomsday. So yeah, I can't actually turn off this barraging. So he's going to chip through a bit of damage, but it's nothing insane. It's only going to be 4 damage through here, which when you don't have any thresholds that really matter anymore, because of the Carrion Husk being gone. Oh, sorry, I take 5. Yeah, because that Carrion Husk is already gone, the thresholds don't matter too much. It is unfortunate I wasted life, but I basically get it back with that Sigil anyway. So I am going to roll Scabskins because, believe it or not, my Doomsday is actually going to be live if I hit the 2 action points, because Writhing Beast Hulk is going to clear my Banish Zone, or clear my graveyard rather, which has exactly 3 Blood Debt cards in it right now, especially if I hold the Sigil, which is what I'm going to do. So this clears all 3 of those Blood Debt cards, which gives me that beautiful, beautiful number 6, which lets me summon Doomsday. And there's no way Ben's expecting this here. He's probably thinking I get to just swing Club or something. But boy, it is fantastic. 2 games back-to-back, I get to summon Blasmafet. Now this is not something that necessarily happens any sort of consistently, but boy is it fun. And these are the highs that you enjoy as a Levia player. When everything goes right, your deck's fantastic. So there we go, another Blasmafet swing into Ben, and this is when he's really hard pressed. He needs to keep cards to kill it. I mean, he doesn't have to, but if he doesn't kill it, I'm just going to roll Scabskins every turn, and it will hopefully equal 6 extra damage every turn, because it costs 0 to swing with, right? And I have the Gambler's Gloves as a safety net. So he's going to block a little bit here, block 4 down to 6. And this is, funny enough, I almost never really use all 3 action points if you roll a 6 there, but because I'm so ahead in the game, I actually don't care about using Sigil to gain life. Instead, it makes more sense to push damage there, especially if Ben lets off the pressure and kills Blasmafet instead of targeting me instead. So really pushing through a lot of damage here. He's not quite in reckless range where I know the game is just mine no matter what. But sure enough, he is gonna kill Blasmafet. It does go bye-bye. Goodbye. Technically I would get intimidated as well off that, but it's not a huge big deal. So the one unfortunate part about getting Blasmafet targeted instead of me is that I actually did need to get some cards in graveyard this turn, because I only have 2 since I decided not to burn Sigil. I'm now only at 2 cards in grave, so this is basically forcing my hand to either break Hope Merchants or break Gamblers. And in this scenario, I actually would prefer to go for Gamblers, because my hand here is blue Soul Harvest, blue Wrecker Romp, Ghostly Visit, and a red Hungering Slaughterbeast. So the Hungering Slaughterbeast is fantastic in conjunction with the Ghostly Visit, right? So I am always benefiting the 4 damage if I roll Scabskins, and I am kind of incentivized to roll anyway because I want to break Gambler's Gloves, because it gives me a line to at least put myself at 3 cards in the graveyard. So I ideally want to try it first, and I do hit that 1, so it kind of just works out perfectly. I don't get a second action point, but that's not the biggest deal right now, because Gambler's Gloves are going to lose a ton of value in the game now, or Scabskins rather, are going to lose a ton of value in the game now because I don't have the Doomsday line anymore, which is really what Scabskins is huge for. That's already gone. So instead, Scabskins did its job, Gambler's Gloves did its job, got itself to grave, saved me from a 1, and I get to still swing in for 7, turning off Blood Debt. Now, of course, this isn't as great as swinging in for 11, which is what it could have been if I hit 2 action points, but you can't have everything go perfect all the time. So instead, I'm able to hold that Ghostly Visit back in Arsenal to guaranteed play it off of something like a Dread Screamer, which I haven't seen this game yet anyway. Now, the one issue here now is that I only have 1 card in graveyard, so there is the potential that I can't fill it exactly as much as I need to. I mean, that's not super likely because pretty much any attack, I'll at least throw something in front of it, and then I can Hope Merchants if I need to. So even with his pulping attack here, it's really just not threatening by any means. I have full knowledge on his damage limit, which is 6. The go again is not relevant, so now I just get to block just to fill grave if I want to, which is pretty much what we see happening here. So now I'm just in complete control of this game. He is in reckless swing range, so as long as I just keep turning off Blood Debt, I have inevitability anyway. So now we get to come in with a Deadwood Rumbler, and the beauty of being able to play Deadwood here is that I'm so ahead in the game that even if I missed on the Blood Debt and took that chunk, he would be forced to block with 3 cards or die. So if he blocks with 3 cards, then all he's doing is swinging Club back into me, which would not actually be lethal because I would have taken 7 to Blood Debt. He swings in for Club. I'm at 5. I can throw Scabskins in front of it. I'd go down to 3, and Reckless doesn't kill me. So I was very safe to swing the Deadwood there instead of going for another line to turn off Blood Debt. So then what we see instead is Ben just setting up an arsenal and passing full back into me. And this is fantastic. You know, these full hands back into a Levia tend to just be quite a bit of damage, or at least healthy breakpoints. That's kind of the beauty of the blue Dread Screamer as well, is that in these late games, it is a very decent breakpoint of 4, because it will at least chip damage through, and even on a play, something like blue Dread Screamer into Ghostly Visit, I mean, he can't just take 2 bits of chip, he will die. So we see Ben covering up that 4, but it is a bit inefficient because when you reckless swing and it's not for lethal, the damage that you deal back isn't really worth losing the entire card. But what we see here, Ben actually has double reckless swing to cover up the 4 and 4 breakpoints of the Dread Screamer and the Ghostly. But I mean, I'm still fine with this. I didn't deal damage. In fact, he dealt damage to me, but I made him skip his whole turn again, so we're happy with that. But now we see I'm in a bit of a tighter situation here because I really do want to close out the game. I mean, I know I have inevitability with the Reckless Swing anyway, but now I am sitting at the point in Blood Debt where I could just die if I whiff. So I have 2 misses in the graveyard with that Blue Dread Screamer and the Ghostly, and then a hit with the Deadwood. So I need to be very careful on ever letting myself miss, which is what I was careful about there. I had that Howl, which I would have loved to play to get this Boneyard Marauder up to 9 so that I threatened 3 cards instead of just 6, or rather instead of just 6 damage, which is 2 cards. But I had to play to not die to Blood Debt there. So by holding the Howl in hand, I'm hoping I get to just play it next turn, because now I've set myself up to have that miss in Graveyard with Sigil, the hit in Boneyard, and then whatever the 3rd card is, right, which could potentially be the Howl. So I'm pretty happy with how I set up the Graveyard there anyway. But what I set up in Arsenal was even better because it was Reckless Swing. So if Ben decides to swing in ever, which he does decide to now, he just dies. So that's what we're seeing fold out here. And that is a swift 2-0 for Levia into Rhinar. Say bye-bye, old brute. Make way for the Shadow Queen.